That's when it hit me. Not a gentle tap, but a thunderclap right through the heart. My daughter Genevieve had forgotten to hang up the phone. Her words, muffled at first, then chillingly clear, painted a picture of my future. It's time for him to go to a care home. He's just a burden, Liam. I didn't say a word, but in that instant, a dam broke inside me. The very next day, I put our old family home, the one Maggie and I had poured our lives into, on the market. It sold faster than pancakes at a Stampede breakfast for a cool $900,000. They came back from a business trip smiling, but there was a surprise waiting for them. The keys didn't fit the lock. They found a note on the doorstep. Just a simple, stark little message. And after they read it well, the screaming started. That's when I knew this wasn't just a simple mistake. They wouldn't just let this go. This was only the first shot fired. The phone rang just as I was scraping the last bit of my shepherd's pie from the plate. Maggie's shepherd's pie recipe, though mine never quite had that same magic without her. I glanced at the caller ID and managed a weak smile, despite myself. Genevieve. Dad, how are you holding up? Her voice carried that familiar warmth that always made my chest tighten with a bittersweet mix of love and loneliness. I settled into Maggie's old armchair, the leather worn smooth from years of her evening crosswords and cups of tea. Oh, you know me, sweetheart. Just finished supper and was about to catch the evening news. I didn't mention it was leftovers from 3 days ago, or that I'd been lost in thought, gazing at Maggie's photo on the mantelpiece for what felt like an eternity. Are you eating enough? You know you can always use that online grocery app now, right? I showed you how. I'm eating plenty, I cut in gently. Though I did have a bit of a close call yesterday. Forgot to switch off the element under the percolator. Good thing I caught the smell from the living room before anything serious happened. There was a pause. I could almost see her frown, that familiar little crease between her eyebrows, a mirror image of her mother. Dad, maybe we should think about getting someone to pop by and check on you more regularly. Liam thinks I'm just fine, Genevieve. Really? How's your conference going? You're up in Vancouver this time, aren't you? Yes. It wraps up tomorrow. Liam's been handling most of the client meetings while I'm stuck in these endless presentations about leveraging digital platforms. She let out a laugh, but it sounded thin-stretched. Listen, Dad, I should really get going. Liam and I have reservations with some potential investors later. Of course, sweetheart, love you. Love you too, Dad. Take care of yourself, eh? I heard a click, then a soft rustle. She must have tossed her phone into her purse, I figured, reaching to hang up my own receiver. But then voices, muffled at first, but shockingly clear through the phone's tiny microphone. Liam. You see how he's slipping Genevieve's voice, no trace of warmth now, just a cold edge. He left the stove on yesterday. What if he burns the house down? My hand froze on the receiver, cold as a January morning. An icy grip seized my chest. It's time for a long-term care facility. Genevieve Liam's voice devoid of emotion. He's becoming a liability, and you know it. Your dad's a good man, but he can't live alone anymore. And this place, it's sitting on a gold mine now. Genevieve's tone had shifted completely, purely transactional. With the way the Toronto market's soaring, we could easily get 900,000, maybe even more. Exactly. Liam sounded utterly pleased. We could sell it, settle him somewhere decent, nothing too extravagant, and finally put a down payment on that lakefront place up in Muskoka. We've been eyeing the one with the private dock. My daughter laughed. A full, genuine laugh. Oh, God. Liam, you should have heard him tonight. So thankful just to hear my voice. He has no idea what we're plotting. The longer we wait, the more muddled he'll get. We should make our move while he still trusts us completely. The phone a heavy dead weight, slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. The very floor Maggie and I had laid together board by board over 3 decades ago. Every plank, every nail put down with dreams of our family's future firmly in mind. I sat in the sudden echoing silence of my now truly empty house, my gaze fixed on Maggie's photograph. Her eyes seemed to pierce right through me, an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Was it disappointment? A warning? Or perhaps just the terrible, profound knowledge of what was to come, that comes to those who've already left this world? The old grandfather clock in the hall, Maggie's anniversary gift to me 15 years ago, ticked its steady rhythm in the encroaching darkness. Outside, the first spring, crickets started up their evening chorus in the garden Maggie had coaxed to life, the one I still putter around in. Something cold and hard settled in my chest, replacing the fleeting warmth I'd felt just moments before, hearing my daughter's voice. My hands, calloused and weathered from decades on construction sites, slowly clenched into tight fists. They truly believed I was a burden. They saw me as muddled, helpless, ready to be managed, parceled off, and forgotten. They were already spending my money, already carving out their new life on the plot they'd mentally dug for me. But I wasn't gone yet, not by a long shot, and I was nowhere near as confused as they wanted to believe. I don't know how long I sat there in the gloom, Maggie's face, gazing out from the silver frame on the end table. The whole house felt different now, heavy with unspoken things, as if the very walls had overheard my daughter's betrayal and were holding their breath. My legs felt a bit wobbly when I finally stood to flick on the lamp. The soft, warm light spilled over the living room we'd painstakingly furnished piece by piece. Every item chosen with care, every dollar saved with sacrifice. There was the burgundy sofa where Jen used to curl up hunched over her homework, and the coffee table, the one I'd built myself out in the garage, sanding it smooth while she played at my feet. I walked into the kitchen and pulled open the utility drawer where I kept all my old receipts and papers. My fingers, almost on autopilot, found the precise folder I was looking for. 20 years of financial records I'd never had the heart to throw away, because Maggie always said, "You never know when you might need them." Art, tuition receipts for 4 years at university. They added up to a cool $48,000. I could still feel the grit of concrete dust in my hair, the plaster under my fingernails after those double shifts. Maggie would always have a fresh pot of coffee brewing, and she'd massage my aching shoulders while I sat at this very kitchen table, paying the bills. "Art, you're working yourself to death, eh?" she'd said one night, watching me crunch numbers to figure out how to cover Jen's spring semester. She deserves better than we had Maggie. She's smart enough for anything. Maggie had kissed the top of my head, a gentle, knowing touch. Just don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful. God, I should have listened. I should have listened to every word. The wedding receipts were in there too, $32,000 for one single day. I remembered telling Jen we could probably swing 5,000, maybe 8, if we really stretched the budget, but she'd cried, actually cried, about needing her dream wedding. So I'd spent 6 months working weekends laying hardwood floors for a contractor friend who paid me under the table. "Daddy, you're the best father in the world," she'd whispered during our dance. Her head nestled on my shoulder, her elegant wedding dress rustling against my rented tuxedo. I'll never forget that moment, but she clearly had. Just like she'd forgotten who co-signed her first car loan when her credit wasn't quite good enough. Just like she'd forgotten who made all those calls to land her that marketing job when she was unemployed for 8 months after graduation. Then I found the bank statements from a couple of years back, right after Liam lost his financial advisor gig for reasons they never quite got around to explaining. They'd moved in temporarily, just until Liam found something new, they'd said. I never charged them a dime in rent. I picked up the tab for the increased utility bills, bought groceries for 3 adults instead of one lonely widower. Liam would clap me on the shoulder and declare me the most generous man in all of Ontario. Jen would give me a hug and promise Dad we'll pay you back when we get on our feet. Well, they'd been on their feet for over a year now, both working good jobs, both making more money than I ever had. But the subject of moving out or paying me back never came up. Like the anniversary dinner I'd paid for last month, $200 at that fancy steakhouse downtown, because Liam insisted they deserved to celebrate. Or the car repair bill I'd covered when Liam's BMW needed a new transmission, a $3,000 hit that cleaned out my emergency. Bart's like a second father to me, Liam had declared to his buddies at their last barbecue, his arms slung around my shoulders, a big performative grin on his face. Couldn't have married into a better family. Funny, isn't it, I'd actually been so damn proud back then, genuinely chuffed to be the generous father-in-law, the man who always had their back, no matter the cost. I trudged upstairs to Maggie's and my bedroom, still exactly as she'd left it nearly 2 years ago. Her small silver jewelry box sat on the dresser, her reading glasses neatly folded beside the lamp. It felt like yesterday she was here. I opened the bottom drawer of her cedar chest, where we'd always kept our crucial papers, and carefully pulled out the original deed for the house. Arthur and Margaret Mackenzie, purchased 1999. No liens, no co-signers, no fancy legal tricks, just our names. And now just mine since Maggie was gone. Clear title, plain and simple, standing there in the quiet of that room. The very place Maggie spent her last days, surrounded by every piece of furniture, every photo, every memory we'd built together. Something deep inside me began to harden. The raw ache was still there, a shard of broken glass stuck in my chest. But underneath it a cold, unyielding resolve was forming. They wanted to pack me off to some facility and sell my life's work, the very foundation I'd built for our family. They genuinely thought I was too old, too bewildered, too grateful for their scraps of attention to even think about fighting back. I glanced at Maggie's photo on the nightstand, her gentle smile. Her voice echoed in my mind, as clear as if she were standing right beside me that night she'd given me that warning. Don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful, Art. Well, Maggie, our Jen, had certainly forgotten. But she was about to get a painful reminder that her old man wasn't quite as helpless as she believed. I walked to my small home office, really just a corner of the den with a cluttered desk, and pulled out the business card I'd tucked away in a drawer 3 years back. Todd Fisher, real estate attorney. Maggie had actually insisted we meet with him after her cancer diagnosis, just to make sure all our affairs were in perfect order. She was always so pragmatic, even then. It was time for another consultation. The next morning I moved through my own house like a stranger on a viewing tour. But instead of seeing the home Maggie and I had poured our souls into, I was seeing it through Liam and Jen's eyes, square footage, market value, liquid assets. Just numbers on a ledger. In the kitchen, my hand instinctively ran along the cool, polished granite countertop. I'd installed that myself, working by lamplight long after my regular construction shifts, because we simply couldn't afford to hire contractors back then. Maggie had chosen the pattern, a beautiful speckled gray with delicate veins of gold that still caught the morning sun. She'd brewed coffee right here on this counter every single morning for 16 years, until the cancer finally sapped her strength. I remembered the Christmas morning Jen, a tiny 3-year-old, taking her very first wobbly steps right across this kitchen floor from the refrigerator straight into Maggie's outstretched arms. We'd both wept with sheer joy, Maggie scooping our daughter up and twirling her around, while I scrambled for the old Polaroid camera, our babies walking in our house. Aunt Maggie had whispered, tears streaming down her face, her voice thick with emotion. In the house we built just for her. The living room, too, held a quarter-century of Christmases. I could still picture 7-year-old Jen's face, absolutely beaming at the sight of the dollhouse. I'd spent 3 solid months building it out in the garage, working in secret late at night after she'd gone to bed. Maggie had painstakingly sewn tiny curtains for the windows, even crafted miniature furniture from cardboard and fabric scraps. "Daddy, it's just like our house." Jen had shrieked, her little voice bursting with delight. And it was. I'd made it a perfect replica, right down to the little bay window in what represented her bedroom. That bay window alone had cost me 6 months of overtime. Maggie had seen it in a magazine and absolutely fallen in love with the idea of reading there, soaking up the afternoon sun. I'd taught myself to cut angles I'd never attempted before, measuring and remeasuring until my back screamed from crawling around the frame. "Art, we can't afford this," Maggie had worried when she saw me marking out the measurements on the wall. "You want it, you'll have it," I'd told her, determined. "I'll make it work." I climbed the stairs to Jen's old room, still painted the soft, sunny yellow she'd picked out for her 16th birthday, still decorated with fading photos of her high school friends and college memories. The very room where I'd rocked her through countless colicky nights as a baby, where Maggie and I had patiently helped her with algebra homework, at the small white desk I'd built to fit perfectly under that cherished bay window. Every corner of this place held a lifetime of sacrifices made out of love. Maggie's side of the bed still had her water glass on the nightstand, her bookmark still marking page 247 of the novel she'd never finish. I'd built these walk-in closets with my own hands, custom designed to fit Maggie's height perfectly. Her clothes still hung there, still smelling faintly of her perfume. This was the room where we'd planned our future, where we'd whispered about our dreams for Jen, where Maggie had died, holding my hand, while machines beeped around us. "Promise me you won't let them take advantage of you," she'd said. Near the end, her voice barely a whisper. "You're too good, Art, too generous. Promise me you'll take care of yourself." I'd promised, but I hadn't kept that promise, had I? In my home office, I found the folder of construction photos Maggie had kept pictures of me laying the foundation in the spring of 1999, 25 years younger and 50 pounds stronger. Me and my crew installing the frame. Maggie in her hard hat, bringing us Tim Hortons coffee and Timbits on hot summer days. Her belly just starting to show with Jen. The financial records from those years told the story Maggie's photos couldn't. A second mortgage, a personal loan from my brother-in-law Ken. Maggie taking extra shifts at the school district library to help with materials costs. We'd eaten Kraft dinner and wieners for months. Drove cars held together with prayer and duct tape. But we'd built this house with our sweat, our sacrifice, our love for each other, and for the family we were creating. And now, my daughter, the baby, who'd taken her first steps in this kitchen, the child who'd played in the yard I'd landscaped by hand, wanted to sell it all and put me away like an inconvenient piece of furniture. I picked up Todd Fisher's business card from my desk drawer. The edges were worn from 3 years of handling, but the phone number was still clear. Jen and Liam thought they were dealing with a confused old man who'd be grateful for any scrap of attention they threw him. They thought I was weak, helpless, ready to hand over my life's work without a fight. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I dialed Todd's number and listened to it wring my hands steady as stone. Outside, the spring morning was bright and clear. The kind of day Maggie used to love, the kind of day for new beginnings. The law offices of Fisher and Associates occupied the second floor of a modest brick building on a quiet side street. The kind of place that specialized in helping regular folks with real problems rather than impressing Bay Street corporate clients. I'd chosen my best suit, the charcoal gray one Maggie had picked out for me to wear to her funeral, and arrived 15 minutes early, my hands only slightly trembling as I signed in at the reception desk. Todd Fisher was younger than I'd expected, maybe 55, with graying temples and the patient demeanor of a man who'd heard every family horror story twice. His office was lined with law books and family photos, a wife, 2 teenagers, a golden retriever, the kind of normal life Maggie and I had tried to build. "Mr. Mackenzie, good to see you again." Todd poured coffee from a small machine in the corner, the rich smell filling the space between legal documents and filing cabinets. "I remember you and Maggie from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." I accepted the coffee, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I need to discuss something delicate about my daughter and son-in-law." Todd settled behind his desk, pen ready. "I'm listening." I told him everything. The phone call, the overheard conversation, their plans to sell my house, and put me in a long-term care facility. Todd's expression never changed, but I caught him shaking his head slightly when I described their eagerness to spend my money on their Muskoka lakefront dream. "Unfortunately, Mr. Mackenzie, this scenario is more common than you'd think." Todd set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "Adult children often assume they know what they think is best for their aging parents, especially when valuable assets are involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they? I mean, legally. Let's start with the basics. Art. The house is titled in your name only since Maggie's passing, correct?" "That's right. Maggie and I owned it jointly, but when she died, it transferred to me automatically. Then, legally speaking, your daughter and son-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They cannot sell it, cannot force you into a care facility, cannot make any decisions about your assets without your explicit consent." Todd pulled a legal pad from his drawer and began making notes. "The house belongs to you. Period." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by something sharper. "So if I wanted to sell it myself, I could put it on the market tomorrow if I chose to. It's your property, your decision." Todd looked up from his notes. "May I ask why you're considering that option?" I thought about Jen's laugh when she'd called me a burden, about Liam's cold calculation of my worth, about 25 years of sacrifice reduced to a real estate transaction. They think I'm helpless, confused. They think they can manage me like a piece of property. My hands clenched around the coffee cup. Maybe it's time I showed them exactly how sharp my mind really is. Todd was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "Calgary's housing market is incredibly strong right now, especially in your neighborhood. Properties are selling within days, often for cash offers above asking price." He paused. "If you were serious about selling quickly before your daughter and son-in-law return from their trip, how quickly could it happen? With the right buyer, and there are plenty of investors looking for properties like yours, we could have a sale completed within a week, maybe less." Todd leaned forward. "But Art, this is a major decision. Once you sell, there's no going back. I built that house with my own hands, Mr. Fisher. Every board, every nail, every custom detail. I know exactly what I'm doing." We spent the next hour discussing practicalities, market value estimates, cash buyer networks, legal requirements. Todd explained that he could have everything prepared within 24 hours if I was serious about proceeding. "The consultation fee is $200, Art Todd said as I prepared to leave. "If you decide to move forward, that applies toward my legal fees for the sale." I paid in cash, feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. Walking to my truck in the spring sunshine, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Jen's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I could picture her in some hotel lobby in Phoenix, probably checking her watch, wondering why her grateful old father wasn't jumping to answer her call. Let her wonder. Let her and Liam make their plans about my future, my house, my life. They were in for the surprise of their lives. The phone kept ringing as I climbed into my truck, Todd Fisher's business card secure in my wallet, and a plan forming in my mind that would teach my ungrateful daughter exactly who she was dealing with. I had built my life from nothing once before. I could certainly tear it down and rebuild it on my own terms. The phone finally stopped ringing, but I knew she'd call back. She always did when she needed something from the old man. This time, she was going to get much more than she bargained for. By the time I reached my driveway, confidence had replaced the tremor in my hands. Todd Fisher's words echoed in my mind. "It's your property, your decision." 25 years of doubt and second-guessing had lifted like the morning fog over Lake Ontario. I was unlocking my front door when the phone rang again. Through the window, I could see it buzzing against the kitchen counter where I'd left it. Jen's name glowed on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I actually smiled. Let her stew for a moment, eh? Let her wonder why her grateful old father wasn't scrambling to answer her beck and call. I poured myself a glass of cold water from the tap, took a deep, steadying breath, and picked up on the 6th ring. "Dad, there you are." Genevieve's voice practically sparkled with a forced, almost saccharine enthusiasm. "I was starting to worry when you didn't answer earlier. Sorry, sweetheart. Just out running a few errands, you know how it is." I kept my tone warm, my voice the familiar, dependable one she'd always known. "How's Phoenix treating you and Liam? Oh, you know how these business conferences are, Dad. All work and no play, eh?" She chuckled, a sound that grated. "But listen, I have the most wonderful news. Liam and I have been planning something very special for you." She paused, milking the moment for dramatic effect. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles going white against the plastic. "We want to treat you to a vacation. You deserve some rest and relaxation after everything you've been through since Mom died." Her voice carried that practiced sympathy, a tone I now recognized as a thinly veiled manipulation. "There's this beautiful place we found. It's like a resort, but with medical staff on hand just in case you need anything. A resort with medical staff." Right. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart. You really didn't need to go to such trouble for me." "Nonsense, Dad. Your family." Liam's voice boomed from the background. He must have been listening on speakerphone. "We've already made all the arrangements. When were you thinking I managed my voice, even knowing full well they wanted me gone before they returned to claim their inheritance?" "Well, we should be back by next Friday," Genevieve chirped. "We were hoping you could be ready by then. Just pack some clothes and personal items. You know, the essentials." The essentials. Not the photo albums Maggie had lovingly arranged. Not the furniture I'd built with my own hands. Just the essentials for an old man being shuffled off to die. "Actually," Jenny cut in a quiet smirk playing on my lips, "I have a surprise for you, too. For when you get back." "Oh, Dad, what kind of surprise?" She sounded genuinely pleased, probably imagining I'd signed some papers or made their job easier somehow. I walked to the bay window I'd built for Maggie, looking out at the sprawling garden she'd planted the porch swing, where we'd spent countless evenings. planning our future. It's something I've been working on since our last conversation. I think you'll be very surprised. You're so sweet, Dad. We'll talk about everything when we get home. Okay, get some rest, and we'll take care of everything else. Sweet. She called me sweet while plotting to steal my life. I will, sweetheart. Love you. Love you too, Dad. See you Friday. The line went dead, and I set the phone down with hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. I walked to my home office and opened my laptop, the screen glowing to life with possibilities I'd never considered before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before I typed, "Real estate agents, Toronto." The search results filled my screen like ammunition in a war I was finally ready to fight. I'd always been methodical. 25 years as a construction foreman had taught me to research thoroughly before making any decision. Tonight, that methodical nature would serve a very different purpose. I clicked through agent profiles, comparing success rates and client testimonials like I used to compare structural steel suppliers. Upscale neighborhoods like Rosedale Forest Hill and the Bridle Path flashed across the screen. Places where houses sold for the kind of money Genevieve and Liam were already spending in their dreams. One name kept appearing in the top results: Brian Cooper, 43 years old, specialized in quick sales, averaging 18 days from listing to closing. His photo showed a professional smile and confident eyes, the kind of man who could make things happen fast. His testimonials were exactly what I needed to see. Brian sold our house in 6 days. Cash buyer lined up within 48 hours. Smooth closing, absolutely no complications. I stared at his direct phone number prominently displayed beneath his credentials. This was it, the moment that would set everything in motion. The second I dialed, there'd be no turning back to the grateful, easily managed old man my daughter expected. Maggie's photo on my desk seemed to watch me, her gentle eyes scrutinizing. I could almost hear her voice, quiet but firm. "Art, are you really sure about this, eh?" I was. More sure than I'd been about anything since the day I'd said goodbye to her. My fingers, surprisingly steady, punched Brian Cooper's number. Brian Cooper. Cooper Real Estate. "How can I help you?" His voice was crisp, professional. "Mr. Cooper, my name is Art Mackenzie. I'm looking to sell my house and I need it done quickly. How fast can these things actually happen these days?" "Well, Mr. Mackenzie, that depends on a few factors, but with the right property and a smart pricing strategy, I've had deals closed in as little as 10 days with cash buyers." 10 days. My heart hammered against my ribs like a frantic drummer. 10 days. Could it really be that swift? "Absolutely," he affirmed, picking up on my surprise. "Calgary's market is incredibly hot right now, especially for well-maintained homes in established neighborhoods. Can you tell me a bit about your place?" I looked around my kitchen, suddenly seeing it not as our home, but as a listing, a product. It's a 2-story, about 3,400 square feet, built in '99. My neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. I've kept it up pretty well over the years. Did most of the work myself, actually. Brian's voice sharpened with a genuine note of interest. "That sounds exactly like what a few of my investors are searching for. Original owner, meticulously maintained, prime location. Those are premium selling points, Mr. Mackenzie. Would you be interested in a property assessment?" he asked. "How quickly could you come by?" My gaze flicked to the kitchen clock. Just past noon. "I can be there this afternoon if you're available. Say 3:00. 3 o'clock works perfectly," I said, giving him the address. After I hung up, the sudden quiet of the house seemed to press in on me the sheer magnitude of what I'd just set in motion, settling deep in my chest. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk through the house Maggie and I had built together, assigning dollar values to our memories. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning obsessively an old habit from Maggie's time. She'd always insisted the house be spotless for any visitor, no matter how casual. I meticulously dusted the bay window, straightened every throw pillow on the sofa, and made sure every surface gleamed. But this cleaning felt different. I wasn't preparing for guests. I was preparing for an execution. At precisely 3:00 p.m., the doorbell chimed. I smoothed down my shirt, taking a deep breath that carried the faint comforting scent of Maggie's lavender sachets, still tucked away in the linen closet. As I walked towards the front door, my hand trembled ever so slightly, closing around the brass doorknob I'd installed myself 15 years ago. Beyond this door lay either my salvation or my damnation. I turned the handle and pulled it open, stepping into my future. Brian Cooper looked exactly like his photo-professional, yet approachable, probably in his early 40s, with the kind of confident bearing that came from years of successful deals. He carried a sleek leather portfolio and a tablet, and the moment he stepped inside, his eyes went wide. "Wow," he breathed, stopping just inside the entryway. His gaze traveled up the crown molding I'd installed by hand, then swept across the solid hardwood floors Maggie and I had selected together. "Mr. Mackenzie, this is precisely what I was hoping to see." I watched him take in every detail, the way the afternoon light streamed through Maggie's cherished bay window. The seamless flow from the living room to the dining room, a feat I'd achieved by carefully removing a load-bearing wall and installing a supporting beam. His appreciation was genuine professional. "You weren't kidding about maintaining this place," he murmured, pulling out his tablet and starting to snap photos. "These hardwood floors throughout, are they original? Installed them myself in 2001. I confirmed, a familiar sense of pride swelling despite everything that was happening. Maggie wanted something that would really last, so we went with 3/4-inch solid oak. I found myself falling into the easy rhythm of discussing my work. "And this kitchen," Brian stopped at the granite counter. His hand glided along the cool, polished granite countertop, tracing every inch of the custom installation. Maggie picked the pattern, I heard myself say, my voice catching slightly. Said the gold veining reminded her of sunlight. I'd spent 3 solid weekends getting the measurements absolutely perfect for that countertop. Brian, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of professional efficiency, typing notes on his tablet, snapping photos of the custom cabinets, even testing the faucets and outlets with the thoroughness of someone who truly knew what buyers looked for. "Art," he said, looking up, his expression serious. "I have to be honest with you. In my 15 years doing this, I rarely see properties maintained to this standard. I'm a builder." I clarified, though I hadn't been on a site in years. "Was a builder. I believe in doing things right the first time. It shows, Art. It really shows." He gestured towards the living room. "May I?" I nodded, following him as he walked around admiring the open floor plan, the built-in bookcases flanking the fireplace, all the touches Maggie had insisted on, the ones that turned a construction project into our home. This bay window, I pointed, a lump forming in my throat. Custom work. Built it for my wife. She always wanted a little reading nook. I could still picture her there, nestled amongst her pillows, lost in a mystery novel, a cup of Earl Grey tea steaming beside her, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Brian was already taking measurements, his excitement barely contained. "Art, I need to show you some comparable sales." He pulled up listings on his tablet. Similar properties in this area have been selling for $850,000 to $920,000. My chest tightened, a strange mix of validation and sorrow. That was even more than Genevieve and Liam had estimated in their cruel little conversation. But given the immaculate condition and the custom features of your home, I'm thinking we price it at $890,000. That should move it quickly while still getting you top dollar. $890,000. I sat down heavily in Maggie's old reading chair, the number spinning in my head like a lottery ball. That much I managed my voice, a whisper. "Art, you're sitting on a gold mine," Brian said, his voice brimming with confidence. "Properties like this don't come on the market often, especially not in this condition." He paused, a glint in his eye. "I actually have an investment group that's been looking for exactly this type of property." "What kind of investment group?" I asked, a fresh wave of suspicion washing over me. "They specialize in high-quality rental properties in established neighborhoods. The best part, they pay cash. No financing contingencies, no repair negotiations. And they can close in 10 business days. 10 business days. Genevieve and Liam would return from Phoenix in 8 days, expecting to find their grateful, manageable father ready to be shipped off to their so-called resort. "What's the catch?" I pressed, leaning forward. "Why so fast?" Brian smiled, a genuine, reassuring smile. "No catch, Art. Cash means no loan delays, no appraisal contingencies that could kill the deal. They do their own inspections, but frankly your house is in better shape than most new construction I see." My gaze swept around the living room. This was the room where Jen had taken her first wobbly steps, where Maggie and I had hosted countless Christmas mornings and birthday parties, where we'd spent quiet Sunday afternoons reading the paper together, side by side. "When would I need to be out?" I asked, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "Standard contract gives you 30 days after closing," Brian explained, "but they're flexible if you need more time. The main thing is getting clear title and completing the paperwork." I thought about Genevieve's voice on the phone, calling me sweet while planning to steal my life. I thought about Liam's cold, calculating words, reducing me to a burden to be managed, a problem to be solved. I thought about Maggie's warning, her gentle reminder about being too generous, too trusting. "Let's do it." I said the words firm, decisive. Brian's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine, almost giddy excitement. "Excellent choice. Art. Let me call them right now." I watched him dial, heard him describe my property with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just unearthed buried treasure. "Cherry Creek area, original owner, immaculate condition, custom features throughout." He ended the call with a broad, triumphant smile. "They want to move forward immediately. I can have the initial contracts ready by tomorrow morning." The sun was setting through Maggie's bay window, casting long, golden shadows across the room, where I had just agreed to sell 25 years of my life. But for the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something that had been missing for far too long. "So we're looking at a 900 a.m. signing. How does that sound, Art? We want to move on this quickly." Brian's voice, calm and professional, hung in the air, but the question felt like a seismic shift. The old grandfather clock in the hall, Maggie's 15th anniversary gift, ticked out the seconds each, beat a hammer blow against the silence. 9 a.m. sounds perfect. I managed the words, carrying more weight than any I'd uttered in years. After Brian left, his assurances of smooth contracts and swift timelines still echoing, I found myself standing alone in the quiet house. The late evening sun, filtering through Maggie's cherished bay window, bathed everything in a warm sepia glow, like a treasured photo of a life I was actively dismantling. But there was no lingering sadness, no regret, only a sharp, almost giddy sense of anticipation. Brian, true to his word, Arrived bright and early the next morning, contracts in hand, a notary in tow, and a carrier of steaming Tim Hortons coffee for everyone. That kind of no-nonsense professional efficiency was something I'd always admired. I settled in, taking my time to read every single line of the documents, the same rigorous attention to detail that had served me well as a construction foreman. This wasn't just paper. It was the blueprint of my next move. The sale price, $890,000. A cash purchase with a closing date set for a mere 10 business days from signing. The notary, a kind-faced woman with a reassuring smile, patiently guided me through each page, confirming my understanding before each signature. "Minimal contingencies, Mr. Mackenzie," she explained. "Just the standard title search and a final walkthrough. And yes, you can remain in the house for up to 30 days after closing if you need to, though most sellers prefer to vacate sooner rather than later, just for peace of mind, eh?" she offered, perhaps sensing my pause. Peace of mind. I almost snorted. The only peace of mind I cared about would come from witnessing Jen and Liam's faces when they finally realized what their burden had orchestrated. That my friend would be priceless. I signed my name, my hand surprisingly steady, and with that final stroke, the intricate machinery of the sale roared to life. The first 3 days blurred into a whirlwind of paperwork and professional inspections. The title company, diligent as ever, began their exhaustive search through decades of property records. The investors, true to their word, sent their own team, a polite, no-nonsense crew who, to my quiet satisfaction, found absolutely nothing to grumble about, instead offering genuine admiration for my workmanship. "Your father-in-law really knew his stuff," I overheard one of the inspectors say to Brian, clearly assuming I was just a quiet fixture, or perhaps already gone. "These floors, the electrical work, it's all top-notch Canadian quality." Days 4 through 6, I became a man possessed by a secret mission. I spent hours online sifting through apartment listings, looking for something small, manageable, but comfortable. A fresh start with nearly $900,000 tucked away in the bank. I found a place in The Meadows, a senior community outside London, Ontario, complete with a golf course and a buzzing community center. It was the exact sort of place Maggie and I had occasionally mused about for our golden years, never truly believing we'd get there. I also started making calls to local storage facilities, a quiet, melancholic task of deciding which of Maggie's things I'd keep and what would regrettably have to stay with the house for the new owners. Her grandmother's china, absolutely. Her small silver jewelry box. The dozens of meticulously organized photo albums. The essentials. The tangible threads of a life beautifully lived together. Days 7 through 9 brought with them a strange, almost exhilarating confidence, a feeling I hadn't known in years. Each morning I woke with a quiet resolve, knowing I was one step closer to not just freedom, but to revealing to my daughter that her confused old father was sharper, more capable than she'd ever dared to imagine. Even Mrs. Dubois from next door, usually a hawk for neighborhood gossip, started noticing the activity, the comings and goings of Brian's team, the official-looking cars. "Oh, just some work being done, Mrs. Dubois." I'd tell her a half-truth that tasted like sawdust in my mouth. I hated the deception, but I knew the full story would spread through the neighborhood faster than a wildfire in August, and I wasn't ready for that just yet. On day 8, Brian called with the final confirmation. "Everything's on track for tomorrow's closing, Mr. Mackenzie," he chirped, his voice brimming with professional satisfaction. "The buyers are absolutely thrilled with the inspection results. Wire transfer will be completed the same day. You'll have access to the funds immediately. That night, I packed a single worn suitcase with only the essentials: clothes, my shaving kit, Maggie's old watch. Not because I was moving yet, but because I wanted to be ready for anything, to be nimble. I looked at Maggie's photo on our dresser, her smile soft and knowing, and whispered, "I hope you understand what I'm doing, my love. I'm doing this for us." Friday morning dawned bright and clear. The kind of crisp spring day Maggie always said was Toronto, at its absolute finest. I dressed carefully in my best suit. Not the somber charcoal one I'd worn to Maggie's funeral, but the crisp navy one she'd bought me for Jen's university graduation years ago. The title company office was a hive of quiet, professional efficiency buzzing with muted congratulations. The buyers, as promised, were represented by their attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who double-checked every clause, every dotted I and crossed T with meticulous precision. Brian handled the paperwork with the calm precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. "Mr. Mackenzie, if you'll sign here and here, an initial there." Each stroke of the pen felt like severing a chain, a definitive break. The deed transfer, the settlement statement, the final acknowledgement that 1247 Maple Street no longer belonged to Arthur Mackenzie in the way it once had. Then came the words I'd been waiting for. "And this is your wire transfer confirmation. $890,000 less closing costs has been deposited to your account." I stared at the numbers on the paper, a figure beyond anything I'd ever seen in one place. More money than Genevieve and Liam had dreamed their burden could ever access. We shook hands all around, everyone pleased with the smooth transaction. Brian walked me to my truck, his smile genuine. "You made the right choice, Art. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need, eh?" I drove home through neighborhoods I'd known for 25 years, past the elementary school, where Jen had learned to read, past the park, where Maggie and I used to walk every Sunday morning. But instead of nostalgia, I felt an almost exhilarating liberation. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck, looking at the house that was no longer entirely mine. The keys to the front door felt heavy in my palm. Tomorrow I'd hand them over to the new owners, closing this chapter of my life for good. Jen and Liam were due back from Phoenix in 3 days. They'd arrive expecting to find their grateful, manageable father ready to be packed off to their resort. Instead, they were going to find an empty house and a lesson they'd never forget. I climbed out of my truck and walked toward my front door, reaching for my phone to make the next call in a plan that was working better than I'd ever hoped. The engine ticked as it cooled in my driveway, but I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. I sat there staring at the house I'd built with my own hands, the house that now belonged to strangers, the house where Jen and Liam expected to return and find their grateful, manageable father waiting to be shipped off. The keys to the front door felt like lead in my palm. New owners or not, I still had access for 30 days. Time enough to complete what I'd started. I drove to the plaza a few blocks away and parked in the lot, my hands steady as I dialed directory assistance for a 24-hour locksmith. The emergency fee would cost an extra $200, but money was no longer a concern. Emergency locksmith. "This is Eddie speaking. I need all my door locks changed today. It's urgent. What kind of time frame are we looking at, sir? As soon as possible. I can pay cash. I can be there in 2 hours. Address." Back at the house, I waited for Eddie in my truck, watching Mrs. Dubois water her garden next door. She waved, and I waved back, my chest tight, with the knowledge that I was orchestrating a grand deception against everyone who thought they knew me. Eddie arrived in a van full of tools and hardware. He was a man in his 50s, with the kind of weary competence that said he'd seen every kind of lock emergency Toronto had to offer. "Security issue, eh?" "Art," he asked, studying my front door. "New ownership situation. Better safe than sorry," I replied, a half-truth that tasted like ash. He nodded like he'd heard it before and got to work. I watched him methodically remove the brass hardware Maggie had picked out 15 years ago because it matched our door knocker. "These are quality locks," Eddie commented as he worked. "Somebody knew what they were doing when they installed them. That was me. I like things done right." The new locks were silver instead of brass, modern instead of traditional. They clicked differently when Eddie tested them, a sharper, more mechanical sound than the old ones. "Here are your new keys, sir. 3 copies of each front door, back door, and garage side entrance." Eddie handed me a ring of keys that felt foreign in my palm. "That'll be $450 with the emergency fee." I paid in cash from my wallet, knowing there would be no paper trail connecting Art Mackenzie to this transaction. After Eddie, the locksmith, packed up his tools and the new keys felt alien in my hand, I stood in the quiet of the house. Now the real work began, trying to distill a quarter-century of a life built with Maggie into what little I could carry. Maggie's small silver jewelry box was the first thing to go into my worn old duffel bag. Then came our wedding photos, faded at the edges, and the battered copy of the mystery novel she'd been reading, the bookmark, still faithfully tucked at page 247. My old college diploma, our marriage certificate, the family photos, and her favorite cookbook, the one with all her quirky little notes scribbled in the margins, followed suit. Everything else, the beautiful pieces that formed the backdrop of our life, the very furniture that told our story, had to stay. It was a wrenching feeling, leaving behind so much of us. I made sure to pack all of Jen's childhood photo albums too, though the irony of meticulously preserving her past while she was actively trying to erase mine wasn't lost on me. Maggie's clothes still hung in the cedar-lined closet, her favorite lavender scent faintly clinging to them, and I touched them a silent goodbye. As I worked, I dialed a number I'd found online for a place called Lakeview Retirement Suites. Sounded better than Sunset Manor. "Yes," I said, explaining my situation. "I need a furnished one-bedroom immediately. Month-to-month lease if you offer the flexibility." Oh, the woman on the other end, a Mrs. Dubois, sounded calm and accommodating. "We have a lovely unit available for immediate occupancy, Mr. Mackenzie," she said. A month-to-month lease is certainly an option. An hour later, I met Mrs. Dubois at Lakeview. It was a modest but well-kept place, clearly designed with seniors in mind, boasting a cozy community lounge and meticulously tended grounds. The one-bedroom suite was simple, unassuming, but had everything I needed to make a fresh start. "A cash deposit is perfectly fine, Mr. Mackenzie," Mrs. Dubois confirmed with a pleasant smile. "When were you thinking of moving in?" "Tonight," I stated, not flinching. Her eyebrows went up just a fraction, but she simply nodded, handing me the lease agreement. I signed it, then handed over the first month's rent and deposit. A casual $3,000. 2 weeks ago, that kind of spending would have given me heart palpitations. As dusk began to settle, and I loaded the last of my belongings into the truck, I caught Mrs. Dubois, my neighbor, peeking from her kitchen window. She gave me a little wave, and I waved back, a knot tightening in my chest. This wasn't just a house I was leaving. It was an entire life. Jen and Liam's machinations had forced me to sever ties I'd nurtured for decades, to cut myself off from a community that had been my anchor. I took one last lingering walk through the suddenly cavernous rooms. My footsteps echoed hollow and unfamiliar now that the house truly belonged to strangers. I lingered in the kitchen, remembering Maggie patiently teaching a tiny Jen how to cut out Christmas cookies, flour dusting her nose. I stood in the living room picturing Jen's pure delight as she ripped open presents on countless Christmas mornings. And in our bedroom, the quietest room of all, where Maggie had drawn her last breath, my hand clasped in hers the faint beep of machines, her final lullaby. "I'm sorry, my love," I whispered aloud to her memory, my voice thick with emotion. "But you'd understand, wouldn't you? You always told me I was too soft, too generous for my own good." With a heavy heart, I turned the new unfamiliar keys in the lock, the sharp click, final, definitive. I drove away from Maple Street, my old street, for what felt like the last time. My rearview mirror filled with the silhouette of the home that had defined me a lifetime, shrinking into a receding image. The sun was dipping below the horizon as I pulled into the parking lot of Lakeview Retirement Suites. My truck, still heavy with the few precious belongings I'd kept, felt like a capsule carrying the essentials of my new, stripped-down existence. I carried my duffel bag to my new front door, my fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar keys to the unfamiliar lock. Inside the small, sterile apartment, I dropped the bag to the floor and immediately reached for my phone. The final critical phase of my plan required one more call. The last piece of the elaborate puzzle I'd constructed, the one designed to give Jen and Liam the shock of their lives. The apartment felt less like a home and more like a motel room, functional but utterly devoid of soul, furnished with generic pieces and still faintly smelling of industrial-strength carpet cleaner. I stood there, phone in hand, Maggie's photo already propped up on the tiny nightstand. My mind raced, trying to decide which bank could best safeguard nearly $900,000 from the grasping hands of the children who felt so entitled to it. I flipped open my laptop on the small dining table, its screen glowing, and began my research. Banks that specialized in substantial deposits, discretion being paramount. A smaller institution, Northern Star Trust Bank, quickly caught my eye. It advertised a focus on personal service and, more importantly, discretion, exactly what I needed. Northern Star Trust Bank, Private Client Division. "This is Brenda Macmillan," a crisp, professional voice answered. "Ms. Macmillan, my name is Art Mackenzie. I need to open an account for a substantial deposit around $890,000. The brief, pregnant pause on the other end told me Brenda was definitely reprioritizing her day. "We'd be absolutely delighted to work with you, Mr. Mackenzie," she said, her tone now considerably warmer. "When would be convenient for a consultation?" "Monday morning, 9 o'clock. I replied, a calm certainty in my voice. "Perfect. I'll have everything prepared for you." The weekend stretched ahead of me, an uncharted, wide-open expanse. I'd never lived anywhere but the house Maggie and I had built together, the one that held every memory, every triumph, every heartbreak. This tiny apartment felt like a different world, yet it was a world of my own making. My choice, not theirs. Saturday morning, I brewed a cup of coffee in the compact kitchenette, the smell faintly metallic and unfamiliar, and methodically began to unpack the few boxes I'd brought. Maggie's small jewelry box found its spot on the dresser. My old construction awards went on the tiny bookshelf, and our wedding photo, a little faded, now stood proudly beside the bed. It was a strange bed, A strange room, a space that had never known Maggie's warmth. But it was mine. Later I drove to the local Sobeys, my cart filled with groceries for one. Simple things, nothing that required the elaborate culinary touch Maggie used to bring to our kitchen. The young man at the checkout, probably a student working part-time, gave me a friendly smile. "New to the neighborhood, eh?" he asked. "Just moved in," I replied, a quiet sense of purpose in my voice. Starting fresh. Sunday morning I stumbled upon a cozy little spot called the Daily Grind, just a few blocks from my building. The barista, a young woman with a vibrant streak of blue in her otherwise dark hair, handed me a perfectly strong coffee. New face, she offered with a warm smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood. Just retired," I told her, looking for a bit of quiet. She nodded. "Well, you picked the right spot. We're mostly early birds and mellow folk around here." I settled by the window, watching the Sunday morning rhythm of this new place. Folks walking their labs, young parents pushing strollers, the quiet hum of community. It was the kind of scene Maggie and I had cherished on so many weekend mornings. But instead of the familiar ache of missing her, a new feeling stirred within me, anticipation. Monday morning arrived sharp and bright. I put on my best navy suit, the one Maggie had insisted on for Jen's university graduation, and drove to Northern Star Trust Bank. Brenda McMillan, who greeted me in the lobby, was younger than I'd pictured, perhaps in her late 40s, with a no-nonsense yet reassuring air. "Mr. Mackenzie, so glad you could make it," she said, leading me to a private office. "How can Northern Star assist you today?" "I recently sold my family home." I began keeping my voice even. "I'm looking for a financial institution that understands the value of a lifetime's work, not just a series of transactions." She nodded, her expression entirely professional. "We pride ourselves on just that, Mr. Mackenzie. Tell me about your needs." I laid out my situation, simply a widower, a recently sold home, and the need for secure, reliable banking. Brenda listened attentively, her questions precise and relevant, never straying into the personal details I preferred to keep to myself. "I'll need to wire the funds from my previous institution," I clarified. "Absolutely no problem, Mr. Mackenzie," she assured me. "We can initiate that transfer this morning. You should see the funds clear by Wednesday." She moved with quiet efficiency, preparing the paperwork for online banking, a debit card, and the traditional checkbook. Given the substantial amount, I'd also highly recommend our premium wealth management package, she added, for enhanced security and personalized service. I signed the documents, the pen scratching faintly as I formalized my new identity. Arthur Mackenzie, client of Northern Star Trust Bank, with access to a substantial sum that Jen and Liam would never, ever touch. Tuesday and Wednesday settled into a quiet, almost meditative rhythm. Each morning I'd walk to the Daily Grind for my coffee, and the barista with the blue streak in her hair, I still hadn't caught her name, but she always remembered mine, would offer a friendly greeting. Afternoons were for exploring my new surroundings, long walks through the quiet residential streets, discovering a small park where other seniors gathered to feed the ever-present pigeons and share bits of news. Then late Wednesday afternoon, the phone rang. It was Brenda from Northern Star, Mr. Mackenzie. She confirmed, her voice holding a note of satisfaction. "Your funds have cleared successfully. Your account is fully active." I hung up the quiet hum of the phone, filling the small apartment. My gaze drifted to Maggie's photo on the nightstand, her gentle smile, a comforting presence. "This simple, pared-down life I was building brick by brick from the wreckage of my daughter's betrayal was entirely my own. For the first time since Maggie had passed, I felt truly, unequivocally in charge of my destiny. Wednesday evening, I settled into the modest armchair that came with the suite. Not Maggie's old reading chair, not the worn recliner where I'd overheard Jen's chilling words. Just a plain, unassuming chair in a plain room that belonged to me and me alone. I opened my laptop, its screen glowing to life, and typed "covert surveillance cameras" into the search bar. My fingers paused, hovering over the keys. I knew with a certainty that was both chilling and exhilarating that what I was about to order would capture the final devastating act of my carefully orchestrated plan. Jen and Liam were due back on Friday, expecting to find their grateful, easily managed father ready to be shuffled off. Instead, they were about to discover that their so-called burden had become their biggest, most unexpected problem. The screen filled instantly with dozens of options for discreet surveillance. I scoured through listings, checking out everything from those big, obvious security cameras to sneaky little gadgets disguised as everyday stuff. After about half an hour of digging, my builder's brain latched onto the perfect solution: a wireless mini camera tucked right inside what looked like a regular phone charger. The specs were exactly what I needed: Wi-Fi enabled with smartphone app control, motion-activated recording, a solid 12-hour battery, and picture-perfect video quality. Best of all, it could stream live footage straight to my phone, no matter where I was, as long as I had internet. I slapped down an extra $40 for express shipping, ensuring it had hit my doorstep by Thursday. The total came to $149, a sum that just a couple of weeks back would have made me pause and crunch the numbers. Now, barely a blip on the radar. With the camera squared away, my thoughts shifted to the next crucial piece of the puzzle, the note. The one that would lay it all out for Jen and Liam when they realized their old keys were useless. My first attempt was too angry raw with the sting of their betrayal. The second, too cold, missing the sheer gut punch of what they'd done. But by the third try, I found it. That perfect balance, dignified, yet absolutely devastating, filled with love but utterly final. I wrote it out in my careful, precise handwriting, the penmanship Maggie always said she admired. Dear Genevieve and Liam. I started the words flowing onto the paper. If you're reading this, it means my plan worked out exactly as I intended. I overheard your phone call, the one about sending me to a care home, because I was becoming a burden. I heard you clear as a bell, calculating how much cash you'd rake in from selling my house. Well, here's the news: the house. It's been sold for $890,000 cash. And that money, it's tucked away safe and sound in my new bank account where it's going to stay. I've found a place where I'm genuinely appreciated, not just tolerated. So don't you worry your heads about old Dad. Instead, you might want to spend some time worrying about your own housing situation. Your belongings have been carefully packed and are currently being stored at Maple Leaf Moving and Storage on Lakeshore Drive. You've got 30 days to claim them free of charge before the storage fees kick in. I gave you 42 years of everything I had. You repaid me by planning to warehouse me away so you could steal my life's work. I truly hope the lesson you're about to learn was worth the cost. Love, Dad. Thursday morning, bright and early, the Purolator truck pulled up to my apartment with a small box. Inside was my new surveillance equipment. I spent a good hour in my kitchenette, fiddling with the device and getting the hang of the smartphone app. The video quality was remarkably crisp, and the audio was sharp enough to pick up even hushed whispers. Thursday afternoon, I drove over to my former house for what would truly be the last time. I still had the garage door opener, the one I'd never bothered to give Jen and Liam, and parked inside, hoping to avoid any nosy neighbors. My hands trembled just a touch as I approached the front door, the new keys feeling foreign in my grip. Inside, the house still held the familiar sense of home. Maggie's lavender sachets, the lemon oil I used to polish the furniture, that faint comforting residue of 25 years of family dinners. But there were new additions that made my chest tighten. Jen and Liam's suitcases were piled by the stairs, their mail scattered across the kitchen counter, clear evidence they'd been treating my home like their own personal storage unit. As I continued orchestrating my own little exile, I carefully placed the camera charger in the outlet near the front door, angling it just right to catch anyone coming in. The view on my phone app showed the entire entryway, including the exact spot where I intended to hang my note. I tested the motion detection walking in and out of frame until I was absolutely certain the system would capture every single moment of their return. Then, with a slow, deliberate hand, I taped the sealed envelope to the inside of the front door, right at eye level. They couldn't possibly miss it. Standing in my living room for one final moment, my fingers brushed the mantelpiece where Maggie's photo had sat for 23 years. The new owners would put their own family pictures there, create their own memories in these rooms that Maggie and I had filled with love. "It's done, my love," I whispered to her memory, my voice thick with emotion. Justice served. I locked the house with my new key, checked the camera feed one last time from my truck to make sure everything was running smoothly, and then drove back to my apartment. The motion detector was armed, the battery fully charged, and my phone confirmed the camera was online, waiting. The motion sensor on my phone was set to ping me the instant Jen and Liam figured out their keys were about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. I was back in my small apartment, settled into my comfiest chair, phone in hand, glued to the camera feed, showing the empty entryway of the house that used to be mine. It was a little past 6:30 on Thursday evening. Tomorrow, Jen and Liam would be back from their business trip, likely already mentally furnishing their Muskoka cottage with my hard-earned cash, blissfully unaware their grateful old father had turned into their absolute worst nightmare. I woke up Friday morning feeling a zing of anticipation I hadn't felt in years, like a hockey fan on Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. Justice was coming, eh? My coffee from the daily grind no less tasted like victory. Even this shoebox apartment felt less cramped as I settled into my chair, my phone showing the still empty doorway of my former home. It was getting on to 4:30. They'd be here soon. I knew their routines better than they did. Jen, bless her organized little heart, always insisted on leaving Phoenix by noon to beat the worst of the traffic. And Liam, he drove like he had a permanent police escort, never a KPH over the limit. They'd be pulling into the driveway within the next hour, give or take a few minutes for a Tim Hortons stop. I glanced at Maggie's photo on my nightstand. "I hope you understand what I'm doing, my love," I murmured. "They left me no choice, eh?" Just after 5:15, my phone vibrated with the sweet hum of motion detection. A black SUV, Liam's of course, slid into the driveway of my former house. My heart hammered against my ribs like a carpenter's hammer on a Sunday morning. I watched the screen as Genevieve, the one to stretch, emerged first, untangling herself from the long drive. Liam, looking a bit rumpled, but still smug, unfolded himself from the driver's side, pulling their collection of designer luggage from the back. They moved with the easy, casual air of folks coming home to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. I watched them stride towards the front door, Jen rummaging in her oversized purse for her keys, while Liam set the bags down with a soft thump. She slid her key into the lock, the very one I'd had changed just yesterday, a simple brass cylinder that now held a world of trouble for them. The key predictably didn't budge. Jen's brow furrowed a precise replica of her mother's frown as she stared at her key ring. She tried again, jiggling it with a growing exasperated twitch. "That's weird," her voice tinny through my phone speaker sounded. "My keys aren't working." Liam stepped closer, his tired but triumphant expression morphing into something more akin to concern. "Let me try the back door." I watched him disappear around the side of the house, while Jen, stubborn as a moose in rutting season, kept wrestling with the front lock. When Liam reappeared a few minutes later, his face had darkened alarm, painting his features. "Back door's locked too, and the garage remote's dead as a doornail." His voice carried that familiar edge of panic I'd been so eager to hear. "Jen, someone changed these locks." "What? That's impossible. Dad doesn't even know any locksmiths," she retorted, her voice rising. Liam, ever the financial advisor, scrutinized the front door more closely, his sharp eyes instantly pinpointing the problem. "These are brand new locks," he stated, his voice tight. "This isn't an accident." Jen, her fingers now trembling, fumbled for her phone. "I'm calling Dad." I watched her dial my old landline number, the one I'd had disconnected a good 3 days ago. After several rings, her face crumpled confusion mingling with a dawning fear. No answer. It's not even going to voicemail. Her voice was now a strained whisper. "Try his cell phone," Liam suggested, exasperated. "He doesn't have a cell phone, remember? We talked about getting him one for emergencies." Jen's voice cracked, then a true fissure appearing in her carefully constructed composure. Liam, his smug confidence entirely evaporated, was now frantically checking the windows. "There. That one's unlocked," he pointed. "I can boost you up." I watched my daughter, still in her crisp business suit, scramble through the kitchen window, the one I'd intentionally left unlatched for precisely this moment. Her tailored jacket snagged on the frame for a split second before she disappeared inside. Moments later, the front door swung open from within. Liam strode in, lugging their suitcases, and then both of them froze. Dead still. Right in front of them at eye level was the simple white envelope taped prominently to the door. Jen's hand, now visibly trembling, reached out and pulled the envelope from the door. Her name and Liam's, written plainly in my careful, old-fashioned script. I leaned forward in my apartment chair, phone clutched in both hands, my breath held. She tore open the seal. Her eyes, wide and searching, scanned my words, Liam peering over her shoulder, his jaw going slack. I watched their faces contort on the screen, confusion melting into shock, then disbelief, then pure, unadulterated horror. "He sold the house." Jen's voice rose to a near shriek, the sound scratching like fingernails on a chalkboard. "How could he do this to us?" Liam, his face a mask of furious disbelief, snatched the note from her trembling grasp. Liam snatched the paper from Jen's trembling fingers, his eyes darting over the words again as if a second read might somehow erase the stark truth. "The conniving old fox." He muttered, his voice a low growl of disbelief. "He played us general every damn step of the way. $890,000. All of it." Jen was openly weeping now, her meticulously applied makeup a ruined dark trails streaking down her cheeks. "He took everything," she sobbed, her voice raw. "That was our future, Liam. Our chance." "Your future?" Liam roared, his carefully crafted, devoted son-in-law facade shattering into a million pieces right there on my screen. "This is your father, Genevieve. You should have managed him. This is all on you." Jen whirled on him, her own tightly coiled resentment finally exploding. "My fault. My fault. You're the one who kept saying he was a liability. You're the one who pushed for the long-term care facility. Remember? You said he was a burden." Her voice cracked. "Well, he certainly acted like one, didn't he? Look what he's done to us." Liam flung his arms wide, gesturing wildly around my living room, the very space they'd envisioned liquidating. "We're homeless, Jen. Our lease is up next week. Where are we going to go?" Oh, the exquisite irony. They were standing in my living room, the one I'd built and paid for, railing about being without a home, just as they'd conspired to shunt me off to some institution and leave me with nothing. A sweet, bitter pill. "Call a lawyer," Jen cried out, her voice thin with desperation. "There has to be something. He can't just sell the house, not without telling us." Liam snorted a harsh, dismissive sound. "With what money, Jen? In case you conveniently forgot, I lost my job 6 months ago, and your high-flying marketing salary barely covers the payments on that Beamer of mine." He practically spat the words. "Then get another job," she shrieked. "Oh, sure, Jen. You think financial firms are just lining up to hire advisors who got canned for questionable transactions?" I watched on the screen as my daughter's face utterly collapsed, the full devastating reality of their situation crashing down on her. No house, no inheritance, no savings, and Liam, the great financial whiz, completely unemployable. How could he be so cruel? She whispered the words, choked. "The same way you were cruel when you called him a burden and plotted to warehouse him like an old armchair." Liam shot back, his voice surprisingly calm, now almost resigned. "The old man. He was smarter than both of us, combined." I watched them through the small window of my phone screen slump onto the very sofa I'd built myself, furniture that would be carted away tomorrow when the new owners took possession. Jen buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking, while Liam stared at my note, the piece of paper that held their ruin with the dazed, hollow expression of a man who'd been thoroughly outmaneuvered. I watched for another moment, the scene burned into my memory, then clicked off the camera feed. I'd seen enough. More than enough. I walked to my small kitchenette, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the only sound. From one of the still unpacked boxes, I pulled out a bottle of Maggie's favorite wine, a 2018 Bordeaux we'd been saving for a special occasion that in the end never quite materialized. I poured myself a generous glass, the deep ruby liquid catching the dim light. I lifted it towards Maggie's photo propped on the nightstand. "To you, my love," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. "Justice served. For us." The wine was smooth, full-bodied, and it tasted exactly like victory. They were learning, weren't they? A harsh, bitter lesson about what happens when you bite the hand that's fed you for 42 years. My phone buzzed a new text message from an unknown number. Probably Jen, frantically trying every avenue already out of options. I didn't even glance at it. I simply deleted the notification, then powered the phone off completely. The silence was golden. I walked to the window of my small apartment, looking out at the Toronto skyline, painted in hues of orange and gold by the setting sun. Somewhere across this vast city, my daughter and her husband were finally facing the true cost of their cruelty. Somewhere in the house that had been my sanctuary, my home, they were finally realizing that their burden had transformed into their most colossal, unexpected problem. For the first time in nearly 2 years, since Maggie left me, I felt a profound, exhilarating sense of freedom. I was no longer a burden to anyone. I was Arthur Mackenzie, my own man with my own money, my own choices and my own future, stretching out before me like an open highway on a beautiful Ontario summer day. Art Mackenzie had left the building, and he wasn't looking back.